One is a haunting silent film based upon a book of a similar nature. The other is maybe some proof that the early 2000s weren't all bad. Phantom of the Opera. They Remade It. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
Yep, sorry, I enunciated that weirdly well. I started to feel myself stumbling over the words, and my throat inevitably kind of dry out. And
it's all about diction and clarity when we're doing these things. It's
yes.
All right.
Yeah, because we've had a history of being clear, concise, and not complete rambling fools.
I know exactly what I'm going to say before I even say it. Every time.
I often don't know what I've said for upwards of 3 days. It's all. It keeps me on my toes. And inevitably with the program, I will mention the weather this time around, and this one has a bit more of a mechanical reason in the fact that I think both of us are getting slightly ill.
Yeah, I'm sick.
Yeah, the cold weather, while it is my favorite, is rarely kind to me, and so my voice is going to be a little weaker than normal, and my nose inevitably is going to have some sort of like moment of sinus, fun times, and I might stumble over some stuff, especially because we are talking about so many names that I'm going to have so much fun reading off. But honestly, honestly, with the locale of it, with my nose being kind of stopped up, it might honestly help.
I don't know what it was like where you are, because, I mean, the two of us, we don't live that far apart.
No.
But I blame this sickness solely on the fact that it's been pretty cold all week, like nights reaching about 30 at worst, or at lowest, and the days being like 60 degrees or whatever with wind. Yesterday, I went out after work, it was like 70-something. It was so hot yesterday, and then this morning it's just cold again. I was like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah, I have no idea. You might live under like a sunspot or something, because like it was cold all day here yesterday.
It's sort of giant reflective dome. Yeah, I because it was the first Friday of the month, which is when I do a bunch of things like, oh, it's time to go outside, vacuum my car, and clean the windows and whatever, because I do that first Friday of every month.
Mm.
And I was like, why is it so hot today? It was horrible.
Yeah, we live in what appears to be that perfect area of the country where the God's thermostat doesn't quite hit all corners of it. It's like you have the thermostat at one end of the house and you have the thermostat at the other end, and then we're somewhere in the middle where we get kind of both.
Yeah.
Like, oh, just California with their nice weather, and then, the Northeast with their horrible weather, and we just get punched by both.
The middle seems to attract a lot of that.
Yeah. Good old Midwestern bullshit.
Yeah.
Well,
but what's not bullshit, or maybe it is. I don't know. Bad segue alert.
We're bad at this.
This is where I play the They Remade It patented bad segue alarm that you've all grown so accustomed to hearing. But I was going to ask what you've been doing these past couple weeks.
Well, you see, I've had an interesting affair between work being fun and illness coming at me very slowly, and my car absolutely deciding to be the absolute worst piece of machinery on the planet until, they fixed it very quickly, and then it's my perfect little favorite car of all time again. I have not really had any time to watch anything. I have truly completely just let that fall to the wayside, because like even like TV shows and everything, I've tried to play. I will say I played more games, but it's not really been anything consistent enough to say like, oh, I've been playing this a bunch. Because I got a new actually gaming laptop, so I can actually play games that aren't 2 pixels across. And so I'm just kind of going through a bunch of different ones, just picking up deals and everything wherever I can, just to kind of start modding some stuff out and that sort of thing. But it's really been nothing specific, so I don't even have anything I could really say about that on the matter.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, it has been a fun time. But God. You ever get to the end of the week and you're just like, wow, now I have time to do fun things. And then you're just like, I don't even have the energy to do fun things.
I got too much, Well, how do you unwind? Do you have time to unwind this weekend, or did everything get pushed off by all of the fun havoc that was wrought? How do you relax?
I think I'll have time this weekend. I'm going to a trivia night tomorrow, so that's fun.
Oh, okay.
Your boy Stuart's making friends finally. Hooray!
Nice. Please fail to answer questions for me, please.
I will do exactly that.
On my behalf. Deliberately. If you get to a question you know the answer to, deliberately flub it for me.
I will either know every single answer without hesitation and know the reasoning behind them and all of these different things, or I will not know a single damn thing. There will not be an in-between.
I came to this conclusion in college because we tried to go to a bunch of trivia nights. I'm not going to play false modest and say I don't know anything or whatever, because I know a lot about very specific topics, I think. Those topics are never in trivia nights. I am horrible at trivia nights because I never know anything they're talking about.
See, I have no idea what to expect from it. So I'm just going to study up on a bunch of random trivia facts later tonight.
The general category is usually the easiest to do that for. But
fair. But yeah,
have fun.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be nice. Otherwise, I don't know. Now that the busyness has kind of subsided for the time being, knock on damn wood, I don't really know. I'll probably try to watch a movie tonight. I might watch one of the things that you had watched today.
I doubt it. I really doubt it.
Well, now I'm interested. At least curious.
Okay. Was that your segment? I don't want to step on you.
No. That's all. I'll find something else to do this weekend. I will hopefully maybe try to draw, maybe try to make something, but otherwise just kind of chilling out and getting some much needed sleep.
Yeah,
it's always sleep.
That. Well, you can never have enough sleep,
I think the greatest argument for a 3-day weekend I've ever heard has been someone breaking down each of the days as you need the first day to rest and recovery, you need the second day for maintenance and basic upkeep, and you need the third day to lay around in a large lounge chair like you're dying of tuberculosis.
Yeah. I know that I am now my grandfather because I got so excited yesterday at work because I got sent a work email reminding me that Sunday night was daylight savings time. And I was like, oh, we get an extra hour of sleep. Yay.
Oh, man, I've always been like that. You don't need to be a grandpa for that one.
It took me a while to get there because I generally tend to go to bed early anyways and always wake up at the same time generally. But daylight savings time, my body doesn't know what to do, so its default is to make me sleep longer. During the spring, that's not so good, but during the fall, it's definitely good.
Yeah. Fuck yeah, longer days. It means getting up in the morning will be even darker. No, wait, no, it would be brighter because it's later in the day.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm
dumb.
I'm ready for it to be lighter when I drive in. I don't like driving at night, and I don't like driving in the rain.
God, we truly have just kind of fallen straight into adulthood, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mortality. Let's pretend for a time. What silly movies have you seen?
Silly movies, huh? Okay, so the first one... the first one's a big one, and we've already talked about it, and I'll touch on it briefly. And that's Dune. I saw the new Dune in theaters. I really liked it. I liked it a lot. I still have to rewatch the not original since they're just based on the book, but the first Dune that David Lynch did.
Yep.
Because I don't remember liking it that much, but I don't know, maybe I have a newer appreciation for it. I don't know. But I really like the new one. To peel back the curtain a bit, we were totally going to do an episode on that later this year.
However, apparently, this was a part 1.
I texted Stu immediately after getting out of the theater because the first thing that happens in the movie, you know, all these studio credits fly by and then the title screen comes up and it says Dune Part 1. And I audibly said, like, I don't even remember, oh, for fuck's sake, or something like that. Because I was like, well, now we can't do this, and Part 2 isn't scheduled until 2023. So, that one's going to be a little while, but...
Like, are we crazy? Like, was this ever mentioned in anything leading up to this point that it was going to be a Part 1? Because I
haven't looked into it, but I mean...
Because I have not seen a single thing about that. Like, I thought it was going to be the full thing, but I realized, like, more and more as I think about it, I think to the trailers and everything, I know the general, at least, plot of Dune. I haven't seen the original, or the David Lynch one. But I know the plot just from Reputation. And from everything I saw in the trailer, I was like, this doesn't seem like the whole story. And so, like, the more and more I think back on it, it's like we see, like, a very brief glimpse of, like, Baron Harkonnen. But he's a pretty prominent figure in the story, if I remember right.
Yeah. And he shows up a fair amount in the first movie, too. I just felt that they were holding back a lot of their scenes in the trailer. I've come to acknowledge that until we do our end-of-year show, I never have any idea what's going on in the industry. I just don't pay attention anymore, because this literally just happened a month ago with Halloween. I was unaware that it was that it was a new trilogy. And then... I'm just like, oh, well, fuck me, you know? I don't know.
And I'll get on this when we get to the end of your show, but I've had this growing feeling of, my God, Hollywood does not know when to shut the fuck up and just give us something anymore. It's not about just making a cool thing and being like, okay, cool, that's that then. It is about dragging it the fuck out for years and years and years. I do not give a damn anymore. I'm not young anymore.
I don't have time.
I don't have the desire to wait on Part 2 for a movie that should have been fully encapsulated for 2 years.
Everyone's been telling me to play Assassin's Creed Valhalla already, and my answer is I can't. I cannot do it. I know how long it is, how big it is. I don't have the time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That was me with Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Yeah, which I did start playing a little bit, but frankly, I mean, I like the Greek-Roman stuff more than Norse anyways. They're both interesting, but that's the only reason I picked it up. And even then, I made it like 10 hours into the story, and I haven't touched it in a couple of months because other things came out that I wanted to play. I played through Inscription. I replayed through the first Sly Cooper. Like, it was taking too long. And I was like, okay, I'll come back to this some other time. But anyways, not to step too far away from Dune.
Yeah, not to ironically take forever.
You may or may not agree. You haven't seen it. I just mean when you have seen it. But this is a weird case where it's like, okay, I see what they did. I'm fine with there being 2 parts because I actually like how they sort of paced the story out.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if they did it differently and tried to fit it all into one movie, it would be slightly longer. It'd probably be 3.5 hours instead of 2.5. But also, I feel like it would have detracted a lot from it. And it's weird because Dune is sort of divided amongst audiences currently. I'm surprised by the amount of people that actively dislike it. It's not like the majority hate it. It's like a weird polarizing fence situation from what I've seen. You either really like it or really hate it. And I was thinking about it because after I had watched it, I was like, the thing that comes to mind when being like, what should I compare this new Dune to? Is it reminds me a lot of Mad Max Fury Road.
Really?
And I was like, well, everyone loved Fury Road. I loved Fury Road. Why don't people like this? And I think it was just more so the takeaways, because my takeaway from Fury Road was primarily the world building, the actual landscapes, settings, like different different scenes, how they're framed so that you can see the landscape as it's presented, and then the colors. That was what my takeaway from Fury Road was primarily, and that's what I see in Dune. But if you compare the pacing, Dune is a lot slower.
Which,
especially with it being a part one. And I think it does it well, but I've sort of reflected on that, and I'm like, well, maybe that's where the people that dislike it are coming from, is that they think it's taking too long. And personally, this is one of those rare instances where I don't mind that it's doing that. But I can understand if that's why someone dislike it. It'd be like, yeah, it's very, very slow.
I mean, all things considered, like, one, the comparison to Mad Max Fury Road and it having a slower pace than that is a low bar, in all fairness.
I understand.
Considering the entire movie is car chase.
Adrenaline, I meant.
Which I'm not even going to begin to say is a bad thing. It's still up there as one of my top 3 favorite movies. But I think that I think that's probably the best criticism that I'm sure that a lot of people have. I think it's probably like Dune on its own originally was just such an epic that, yeah, it was a lot. It was dense, and it was just a very different kind of sci-fi. But I think the problem with it now, the criticism that I've seen a lot, is that people are comparing it to Star Wars, which is ironic considering people compared Star Wars to Dune.
I have not seen that criticism, but that's
I've seen it.
I can see that. That's like the preeminent sci-fi anything.
Exactly. And
anymore.
And so it's just gotten, it's this another part of this whole thing with Hollywood of just, especially with Disney and everything at the helm with so much shit, of it's just all kind of hitting the same notes now. Like this, like it feels like it, again, this is a thing I'm going to get into with the end of your chat, where it really just feels like everything is kind of the same. Like every game and every movie and every restaurant and everything has basically the same shit all the time. And so of course everything's going to feel like it's getting compared to everything else because everything's so damn bland now. Like it's just, and it's hard to really take any of those criticisms serious anymore. And I just have to kind of just block them out. But God damn it, if all this shit is not so freaking similar now.
There's one semi-famous copy pasta now that you've probably seen where it was a tweet that basically the negative review of Dune was that it wasn't funny.
I think and
yeah, the big responses to that are just making fun of them, like, oh, it didn't have enough MCU style quip lines, so the movie's not good. 1 out of 10 stars and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of true. Why did the movie if that's your opinion, that's fine. That's your opinion. But why does a movie have to be funny for it to be a good movie? That's just a weird take. Like, that's just saying that all genres should be merged together into just one Akira style mass of nothing. I don't get it.
I think it's just this general consensus that everything nowadays has to have some sort of ultimately positive experience like that. Like not in a grander sense of, oh, this was a good quality product of a different nature. It's just it's like saying every breakfast cereal has to be super sugary and everything, where it's like for before people like kids and everything will eat it. That just kind of seems like, I blame fully Marvel for this. That every big major movie now has to be like quippy and like funny and have all these like different bits and pieces and everything that people can, constantly tweet about and constantly be happy about and all this sort of stuff. It's like, it really doesn't. Like, it really, really doesn't. On the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum, a lot of movies kind of take it too hard in the opposite route and just make like the fucking Revenant, where it's just like, oh, here's 2 hours of this person getting the absolute hell kicked out of them. And it's just like, my God, man. we have middle grounds.
Yeah, and they can exist in there. I guess I don't see why the extreme is inherently bad, because it's not reflected in the other extreme. But yeah,
right,
you can exist somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't think that Dune is the extreme end of any specific genre because there's no jokes in it.
Yeah, no, it's old school sci-fi with a bunch of modern CGI and modern sci-fi concepts to kind of water it down, but still.
Yeah. There's one joke that I can actually think of in the Dune movie, and it was in the trailer. Like, it's not a comedy. But the end of that rant.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll bring, like I said, we'll bring all this back up in the end of the year.
Oh, probably, yeah. And not to harp on this, I did watch 3 other things. I watched Mike Myers in The Love Guru, Kevin James in Zookeeper, and Nothing in Epic Movie. And yes, those are 3 very bad comedies from the 2000s, and the reason I did that was, 1, because of some podcast episodes that I've been catching up on of a show I quite like. But besides that, I've already made it abundantly clear on the program that I'm a huge fan of awful horror movies because I actively find some enjoyment in them. I don't know if it's been as clear, but I have a weird, not enjoyment, but fascination with bad comedy. And it's because most of the time while I watch it, instead of actually absorbing what's going on, every time an unfunny joke happens or lands, I'm thinking to myself, how would I have done that differently? And that sounds really pretentious because 1, I'm not a comedian, and 2, who's to say that how I would do it differently would be funnier to other people? But it's an exercise that I like to put myself through.
It's like buying a fixer-upper house.
Yeah, if I knew anything about houses, yes.
Yeah.
It's exactly like that. But instead I rented The Love Guru for $1.99. I didn't actually rent it. I watched it for free. But,
okay, good. I was about to be like, okay, but like, I've worried about the idea. I've worried about the concept of you being a mild masochist for a while now, and it's like, at the very least, make sure it's mostly free.
Yes, I'm not.
that you're paying money for this treatment now. That's when I start to get concerned.
Don't say too much. Some of these are not hard to find, people. They're really not. But
I mean, they're not. Many of them are not worthy of finding. That's the reason why.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, yeah. That's the long and short of it. Like I said, it's not like I'm an expert in comedy myself, but I think it makes me better at understanding humor, at least. To try, it's almost like I'm writing a thesis paper in my head every time I watch one of these bad movies, and I just don't write any of it down because who would care, you know?
I mean, yeah.
And that's pretty much why I did that. But that's why I kind of laughed when you said maybe you'd watch one of these, because I was like, okay, well maybe you'll like go to the movies to watch Dune. I don't know if it's direct streaming anywhere. Most movies are. I
think it's on HBO Max, but if I did, I'd go to the movie.
Okay.
I'd go to the theater for it.
It's one of those theater experiences, baby. But yeah, you wouldn't. It's not like you'd want to seek out any of the other 3. 1, you've probably already seen them, and 2, if you haven't, who cares? But with the exception of the 2 movies we're talking about today, that's all I've watched.
And that's a nice little fun segue into what is inevitably going to be a very fun exercise with my voice being in and out, and that's pronouncing a bunch of French names. Oh, it's the Phantom of the Opera. So we're going to kick it off with the 1925 version, a silent film. And I will go ahead and say that the directed by and screenplay by list is lengthy, apparently. So I'm just going to go and run through those. It was directed by Rupert Julian and uncredited directed by Lon Chaney, Ernst Lamy, and Edward Sedgwick. Screenplay, All uncredited was by Walter Anthony, Elliot J. Clausen, Bernard McConville, Frank N. McCormick, Tom Reed, Raymond L. Schrock, Jasper Spearing, and Richard Wallace. Fuck's sake. And this is all based upon the book of the same name by Gaston Leroux. The film opens with the debut of the new season at the Paris Opera House, with a production of Gounod's Faust. Comte Philippe de Chagny and his brother, Vicomte Raoul de Chagny, played by Norman Carey, are in attendance. Raoul is there only in hope of hearing his sweetheart, Christine Daae, played by Mary Philbin, to hear her sing for the evening. Christine has made a sudden rise from the chorus to understudy of Madame Carlotta, the prima donna of the theater, played by Virginia Pearson. Raoul visits her in her dressing room during an interval in the performance and makes his intentions known that he wishes for Christine to resign and marry him. Because, that's what all these old movies are like. Christine refuses to let their relationship get in the way of her career, however. At the height of the most prosperous season in the opera's history, the management suddenly all resign. As they leave, they tell the new managers of the opera ghost, a phantom who is the quote-unquote occupant of box number 5, among other things. The new managers laugh it off as a joke, but the old management leaves, troubled. After the performance, the ballerinas are disturbed by the sight of a mysterious man in a fez, because it's France, prowling down in the cellars. And they wonder if he might be the true phantom. Meanwhile, Madame Carlotta has received a letter from the Phantom, demanding that Christine sing the role of Marguerite the following night, threatening dire consequences if his demands aren't met. In Christine's dressing room, an unseen voice warns Christine that she must take Carlotta's place on Wednesday, and that she is to think of only her career and her master. Himself, obviously. The following day in a garden near the opera house, Raoul meets Christine and asks her to reconsider his offer. Christine admits that she has been tutored by a divine voice, the quote-unquote spirit of music, and that it is now impossible to stop her career. Raoul tells her then that he thinks someone is playing a joke on her, and she storms off in anger. Wednesday evening, Christine does indeed take Carlotta's place in the opera. During the performance, the managers enter box number 5 and are startled to see a shadowy figure seated there, who soon disappears when they are not looking. Later, Simone Bouquet, played by Gibson Gowland, finds the body of his brother, stagehand Joseph Bouquet, hanging by a noose and vows vengeance. Carlotta receives another preemptive note from the Phantom. Once again, he demands that she say that she is ill and let Christine take on her role. The managers get a similar note, reiterating that if Christine does not sing, that they will present Faust in a house with a curse on it. The following evening, despite the Phantom's warnings, a defiant Carlotta appears as Marguerite. During the performance, a large crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling is dropped into the audience. Christine enters a secret door behind the mirror in her dressing room, descending into the lower depths of the opera. She meets the true Phantom, played by Lon Chaney, who introduces himself as Eric, and declares his love of her. Christine, in response, faints, and Eric carries her to a suite fabricated exactly for her comfort. The next day, she finds a note from Eric telling her that she is free to come and go as she pleases, but that she must never look behind his mask. Christine sneaks up behind the Phantom and tears off his mask, revealing a deformed, skull-like face. Enraged, the Phantom declares that she is now his prisoner. She pleads with him to be able to sing again, and he relents, allowing her to visit the surface one final time. Released from underground, Christine makes a rendezvous with Raoul at the annual masquerade ball, at which the Phantom then appears in the guise of the Red Death, of the, Edgar Allan Poe fame and other things. Raoul and Christine flee to the roof of the opera house, where she tells him about her experiences under the opera house. Unbeknownst to them, the Phantom is listening nearby. Raoul plans to whisk Christine safely away to London following the next performance, but as they leave the roof, the mysterious man with a fez approaches them. Aware that the Phantom is waiting downstairs, he instead leads Christine and Raoul to another exit. The following evening, during her performance, Christine is kidnapped by the Phantom. Raoul rushes to her dressing room and meets with the man with the fez, who reveals himself to be Inspector Ledoux, played by Arthur Edmund Carraway, a secret policeman of Paris, who has been tracking Eric ever since he escaped as a prisoner from Devil's Island, which is apparently a real place. I did not know that. It's the penal colony of Cayenne. So, fun facts for you. Ledoux reveals the secret door in Christine's room, and the two men enter the catacombs of the opera house in an attempt to rescue her. They fall into the Phantom's dungeon, a torture room of his own design. Philippe has also found his way down to the catacombs looking for his brother. Philippe is drowned by Eric, who returns to find the two men in the torture room. The Phantom subjects the two prisoners to an intense heat. However, the two manage to escape the chamber by opening a door in the floor. In the chamber below, the Phantom shuts a gate, locking them in with barrels full of gunpowder. Christine begs the Phantom to save Raoul, promising him anything in return, even becoming his wife. At the last second, the Phantom opens a trapdoor in his floor through which Raoul and Ledoux are saved. A mob led by Simon infiltrates the Phantom's lair, and as the mob approaches, the Phantom attempts to flee with Christine in a carriage that had been meant for Raoul and Christine to escape later in the evening. While Raoul saves Christine, the Phantom is thrown by the mob into the River Seine, where he soon drowns. And this is apparently in an epilogue, but I did not see it in the version I had, which I'm going to get into, that apparently in a brief epilogue, Raoul and Christine are shown on their honeymoon in some area called Viroflay. Yeah, there's all that then. And then, thankfully, the 2004 version, directed by Joel Schumacher, screenplay by Andrew Lloyd Webber, is shockingly similar, with a few extrapolatory scenes, just kind of like drawing out the origin of the Phantom and all this different sort of things, and explaining the love between Raoul and Christine a little bit better. Trying to think. The only major additions being there's a sort of side story going on that kind of leads into an epilogue of an elderly Raoul eventually leaving a clapping monkey box on the grave of Christine, which had belonged to the Phantom when he had kidnapped her, which I really thought was not a great thing to leave on a grave, but whatever. And also notably that the Phantom survives the end of the film. And instead of... He's portrayed as a much more tragic figure. He ends up letting Christine and Raoul go because he recognizes that they truly love each other, and because he loves Christine, he can't bear to hurt her like this. And also, he doesn't have a fully messed up face. It's actually not that bad, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'll talk about that.
Yes. But I'll go ahead and run through the cast list, just so we can kind of get all that settled. We have Gerard Butler as the titular Phantom, Emmy Rossum as Christine Daae, Patrick Wilson as Raoul de Chagny, Miranda Richardson as Madame Giry, who is kind of the replacement for Ledoux in this, as being the one to explain kind of the origin of the Phantom, but giving a much more human backstory, but also less human because it's the whole thing with the circus and everything. I don't know, we'll get into it. And then Minnie Driver as Carlotta Guidicelli. I believe that is. Yes. And then Simon Calloway as Gilles Andre, who is a male opera singer in the opera house.
I thought you were about to say Simon Cowell.
Honestly, I read that and I was like, wait, hang the fuck on. There's a few other characters throughout it, but those are the core cast at the very least. So, but yeah, that's your lot.
Hooray! And now I do have a number of thoughts on both of these, but before I get ahead of myself, we'll do full circle. So there's a couple this time around. We have 5, and it's mixed between the two. But the first one, I've got to get it out of the way. He can't keep getting away with this. It's motherfucking Snitz Edwards back again.
Oh, yeah.
Another instance where I saw his face, and I was like, son of a bitch. I know we already talked about this, but I should not be, like, recognizing character actors from silent movies at this point. But...
Our nemesis.
Our nemesis, Snitz Edwards.
I mean, honestly, our nemesis is fucking Scorsese.
Yeah. But he was Florine Papillon in 1925's The Phantom of the Opera. He was the evil associate in 1924's The Thief of Baghdad, and he played the lawyer in the Buster Keaton classic, also in 1925. I'd forgotten that. Seven Chances.
See, this is what I was talking about, like, with our intro thing, where they could just make a bunch of insanely good movies all in one year, and now we have to, like, wait years and years and years between all of them.
Yeah.
My God. You could just take an afternoon and finish filming 8 movies back in the day. Now in afternoons, how you get makeup on.
Yeah. You're sentenced to 12 hours in the Grinch chair. Everything else is kind of a little lower just because they're background or uncredited. But I will go through them anyways. Just don't expect to be like, oh, I know who that is. But we have Eleanor Vanderveer, who was uncredited as an opera goer in The Phantom of the Opera in 1925. She was uncredited as a medical student in 31's Frankenstein, and was uncredited as a theater goer in 32's Scarface.
They really did a lot of uncrediting back in the day.
They really, I guess they put all the credits up front, and it's always like 6 or 7 names. It's like, fuck you, extras.
Yeah.
You get paid in a single bagel, no schmear.
To be fair, in that day and age, that wasn't nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, ooh, a bagel.
Bagel and schmear? Papa! No, look what bounty I have brought.
That's my boy.
It's fun making fun of the dead.
And finally, for the 25 version, we have John Miljan, I think it's Milan, who was Valentine, uncredited. And he also was that's right, I remember that character. He was the blind balloon vendor in 51's M.
Oh.
So the one who recognizes the whistling tune of the killer character.
Wow, that is a deep cut.
I was like, oh, I read it and I was like, wait, I do know who this guy is. Okay, well, he was in 25's Phantom of the Opera.
Huh.
Now we have two for the 2004 film. Elena Buda was a ballet girl in Phantom of the Opera. She was also uncredited as a character dancer in 2005's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And Sebastian Torquia was a ballet boy in the Phantom of the Opera, and he was guard number 3 in 2019's Aladdin. Very prestigious.
Well, I see he's moved up in the world.
Yeah, he's...
With a
he lost his flair for dance and
went to the mediocre world that is that Aladdin movie.
He's now security. He's
a
police officer.
You gotta grow up sometime, I guess.
Yep. Leave flights of fancy in the past.
Yeah. I'm also surprised, if that's kind of the extent of it with bigger names in this one.
That's it. We haven't talked about a lot of these people before. Hard to believe, but maybe that's because we keep picking bullshit. Or I keep picking bullshit.
I mean, in all fairness, I've picked some odd ones too. This one's a hard one to fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to pull in Willy Wonka because I was like, come on, let's.
I take the easy route. You are able to find the what is either the beautiful little truffles in the dirt or what is essentially a petrified horse apple. Yeah.
Ew.
Alrighty. Well, I'm sure we have many things to say. I'm going to take a nice long drink of water. If you have any revelatory things, this would be the opportune moment for a spit take. But, that's up to you.
Depends what you will quantify as spit take worthy. But, this is sort of similar to when we discussed a previous horror movie, and I can't even remember it, shame on me, where I can't remember what we discussed, but basically it boiled down to I had not seen the original before, and I was ashamed that I had not, as a huge horror fan. And this is another example of that, where I have never seen any of the adaptations of this movie, with the exception of Phantom of the Paradise.
Yes.
Which I have discussed before.
You go ahead.
I was just going to say, so, aside from Lon Chaney, I'm not a big fan of the original movie, to be honest. I found it kind of boring, really slow. I think it takes too long, which is something we mentioned about before the show. And you bring up, we both watched the re-edited cut, so I looked it up on my phone when you were going to refill your drink, and I saw that it's somehow, the version we watched is even shorter than the original version. I was like, oh my god.
Which is still shocking, because even when we went into this, we both commented, man, this movie felt long.
It did!
And I'll go and say, this is one of the rare occasions where I've actually seen the original before I've seen the remake. And I've talked about it on the show before that I'd actually seen it in at the university my brother and sister went to, they were choir members at their cathedral there, and they every year on Halloween they actually show. I don't know whether it's a different silent movie every time, but they show at least Phantom of the Opera in the cathedral, and they actually have a live organist performing for the music. And so it's this, it's honestly one of my fondest film memories, because it's just like, you go in there, all the choir members are like putting on this whole show. The whole cathedral is meant to be decked out like this gothic horror style. Like all the folks are like walking around like pretending to be various like people in states of either like madness or they're demons, or like they're all just like kind of shambling about and around. It's like it creates this really creepy, cool atmosphere. And it's just it was this whole experience. Like they did a whole choir piece before the film started, and then obviously the live organist was fantastic. It's honestly one of the coolest experiences I've ever done with movies. And so I think I'm going to say I'm going to be biased.
Which is fair.
It's hard. It is difficult to do silent movies justice in the modern era anymore, because you really got to do it as authentically as you can. Like if you ever have an opportunity in your city or wherever where they're doing silent films and they have live performances for the music and everything, it is a joy to do. It is something you cannot pass up if you ever have the chance. Because it completely like it gets it. Like it really is just like, oh, this is why these were so popular. This is why film stuck around, because it was so kind of like surrounding you, and you actually felt you were kind of a bit more a part of the experience. It kind of like still harkening back to like actual stage plays and everything, which obviously is I don't know if that's coincidental or ironic in this case, considering the following one was the one that was actually based on a stage play.
Yeah.
Like I should say the 2004 movie was based on the stage play version of this production. It's a pretty crazy experience. So like I said, going forward, I will probably have lots to say about the 25 one, and probably have a much more shockingly positive opinion than it seems it would. But I do firmly agree that just watching this on its own is pretty dull.
And it's a shame, like you were saying, if I had opportunities near me to do stuff like that, I would. And trust me, I've looked. There was a period of time right before the pandemic hit, so they ended up canceling it. But there was a theater that was showing a handful of old movies throughout April, I think, every Sunday in April, and they were going to show them. And I actually was set to go to a showing of Easter Parade with Ann Miller, which is like a 50s film, and I was like, oh, I've been wanting to see that. Long story, this was all following that Mulholland Drive film project I did in college. Ann Miller shows up in it, and I was like, oh, I really like her. And she was a dance icon, and so I was going to go see this movie because she was in it. And I think it was called Easter Parade, but pandemic happened, and so I didn't end up going. But I'm always on the lookout for stuff like that, because it really does make or break a lot of movies.
Yeah, especially older films.
Especially older films. And so I do understand that. It was just really hard for me to get into the 25 one. Because of that, and also, but also to that end, I think I would have enjoyed it more had I seen it in a theater, but I think I'd still have a lot of the same problems.
Yes.
Or similar problems, because I'm not interested in any of the characters in the movie aside from the Phantom.
Yeah.
Whereas I have a fondness for most every character that shows up in the 2004 version, and if we're talking about biases, it's a fucking musical, and as has been shown time and time again on this podcast, I'm a sucker for musicals. I don't know why, I just like them.
No, that's fair. I've got a soft spot for them.
So that's already a big check mark there for me.
It does also open up like just a sock to the face comparatively with, like, obviously the opening for 2004's Phantom of the Opera is pretty famous at this point, just like with the full, like, the chandelier scene and like the pipe organ like blaring out in the whole situation. I had never actually seen the scene before. I had heard the intro overture before, obviously, but my God, seeing the whole thing going, and then the music just belts out at you. It's like, okay, I think I'm in for it this time around. And then like following it up with like that early 2000s like electronic synth drum music that goes along with it and everything. It's just like, this is such a strange experience. And like, obviously the music was written in the 90s and everything, so it makes sense for like why the music is like that. But in any other circumstance, it would be the most dated sounding shit, but it somehow still works.
Mm-hmm.
It is so like over the top and just like does not hold punches with its music that it is impossible not to love it. So yeah, it's that's going to be my bias on this one. Is like, I just think the music is fan-freaking-tastic.
In terms of another confession, as I proclaim to be a huge musical fan and fan of musicals, this was my first time even hearing the songs, because I had avoided it for so long. My mother even had like the CD soundtrack, I remember, for the musical, but I avoided it because it looked
cheesy.
Just purely based on look. It looked cheesy, and it looked like sort of boring romantic classical, which I was not into for the longest time. I like it more now. But I was like, that does not seem interesting to me in the slightest. So having heard it this time around, my initial thought, I won't talk about it that much because we're not discussing that movie. But when I was hearing the soundtrack, I was like, this is one of the reasons I like Phantom of the Paradise so much, because it has that sort of rock aspect thrown into it as well, and it's kind of a melding of these different types of music.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was immediately hooked by the first song, and I wasn't disappointed by really any of the preceding songs either. I liked them quite a lot, I must say. And just backed up by all the fantastic character performances. I was incredibly engaged, and it's longer than the 25 one, but to me it didn't feel like it. It really didn't. Because I was fully invested.
Right. I think, I don't know what it is for me. There were a lot of chunks of the movie where I really was just like, okay, I think we could trim a bit of this out. Like, obviously that could have been said about the 1925 one as well, which is insane considering the length of it already. Most of it I did find compelling, obviously, but they're just like longer sequences and everything, or longer periods of like, it feels like it's trying to build tension, but it's really just not working too well. Like the whole scene where they go to where Christine goes to the graveyard to visit her father's grave. I think really that entire sequence could have been almost entirely cut. Like, it's basically just an extension of the scene from The Roof, where they're talking about, like, like, the nature of the Phantom and, like, how he's kind of been this mentor type and everything. And, like, now Christine has betrayed, like, the Phantom's like, now Christine has betrayed me, now I have to, like, do what I need to do.
And now we duel.
The whole thing of it was just, like, it was the hero literally riding in on a white horse, and the whole situation, I was like, all right, come on. Like, there's a lot of cheesy moments, and I was just like, okay, I think we're fine. And like every scene, it feels like every scene that had a horse in it, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, can I just say, there's a scene in the original where Christine is being first taken into the catacombs and shown the way to the Phantom's lair, and he has a horse waiting for her there, and so I think it's meant to be like, okay, he's escorting her through what is essentially a dank sewer. He wants to like keep her pristine and all this sort of stuff because, you know, gentlemanly type shit. And so they travel what appears to be at least a fair distance before getting onto the boat that would lead to the lair. In the remake, it's literally during the song, during the famous, like, you know, Phantom of the Opera song, as they're walking through, it's like they turn a corner and all of a sudden Christine is just on a horse. And it's... Yeah. And, like, they don't even travel that far. They travel... Because they've already been walking through the catacombs for, like, a few stanzas. And they walk down, like, one hallway and a half. And then they immediately get back off. And I was like, like, I should also say for this time around, I actually saw this one before I saw the original. Just because like I knew that I had already seen the original and it wasn't going to take as long. And so I was like, why the fuck is there a horse? Like, but then obviously the remake, it was like, okay, cool, they just remade it because there was a horse in the original scene. But it almost makes it worse because it's like, no, it makes even less sense because like he barely took her any distance. Like, what was the point of that? Oh.
So I know they pulled it in because of that sort of inclusion already represented, but in a weird sense, I actually like it more because that entire sequence to me feels so airy and dreamlike.
Yeah,
that it's like, oh, and now she's suddenly doing this, and it's sort of pointless, and just the sort of breathy singing she gives in that particular segment, because usually it's displayed because he's been mentoring her, that she has this really professional voice, and she can take the main spot, and that's what he wants for her anyways.
Yeah.
But in that particular song, anything she ends up saying, it sounds almost hollow to me, like none of it's actually happening, even though it really is. And I was like, this is really interesting to me. I really like it. So,
oh yeah, I did still overall.
That part I did like.
Yeah, I did still overall love the scene. It's a scene like even like throughout all of that. Like, of course, they walk through the hallway with like the chandelier hands and everything. Which is I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, but but then of course they show like later. It's like, oh, it was clearly just like, if not not necessarily a hallucination, but more like, you know, she was basically being entranced by the Phantom. But it was just so jarring for me. It's like, it just all of a sudden, horse. It's like, okay,
yeah,
there's a whole ass animal there now. But yeah, like, yeah, that's where that's where the suspension of disbelief is pushed to my breaking point. It is horses.
I do get.
Which is hilarious.
I guess maybe I don't get it. I was about to say I understand, and you're just.
I don't know.
I disbelieve horses.
If you understand, I would be concerned, honestly. Yeah, like I do like the airiness and everything that they are willing to go for with the new one. It's just like I said, there's so many moments where it's just like, it's just cheesy enough that I'm just a bit kind of taken out of it. I'm like, all right, I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that.
I say that as if the 1925 doesn't have its own with Ledoux, where it's basically like, oh, it's once again, here's the character who gets to explain the plot. Which Madame Giry did in the other one, but this one was literally like, now the police shall save the day sort of thing, whereas like, fucking shut up.
It's the police!
Thank God! It's Scarface all over again.
We have the man surrounded. Something I did want to touch on, and you already talked about it in your synopsis, but the actual effects between the two, it's kind of strange, because in terms of set design, not only is it more opulent, which is kind of to be expected, especially based on a musical taking place in the specific time in France in an opera house. I get it, so it's going to be gaudy, but also like the different aspects of the catacombs and his lair, and whenever like the candelabras are rising out of the smog, there's so much detail and beauty that's sort of going into the practical effects to sort of bring that to life and make it seem, like I was saying, more dreamlike and mysterious in different aspects. But the fact that they really did not seem to care what the Phantom actually looked like is a little bothersome to me. And I don't know if that's because he was played more as I don't want to say potential love interest, but as an aspiring love interest. Maybe that's why. Maybe they were worried that an audience wouldn't be as into this singing man if he looked more like a monster. But it really, and maybe you have some trivia on that. I don't know. You always have the trivia, and I do not.
This time around, I've forgone it for the most part. Just because, like, not for any particular reason. I just didn't really care. I'm sure I could look up part of it, but I don't think there's anything specific.
The original Phantom makeup for Lon Chaney is so iconic,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And iconic in horror, but also in practical effects, because at the time, like, that is a monstrous looking man.
Yeah, I
You
mean, that's a
know,
monstrous looking man now.
he could already, you know, contort his face, and stuff like that, and that's part of where his fame comes from. But you know, the actual makeup plays into that as well, and so that left a really big that left a lot of distaste in my mouth when he's actually, you know, sort of revealed in the 2004 version, because I was like, oh, well, that's kind of lame.
Yeah.
And I assume your thoughts are probably around the same area as that.
Gotta say so. Yeah. Like when I had seen the original that first time, because I had obviously everyone's seen like the images and everything from the 2004 one, just talking about like showing the partial domino mask and everything, and then seeing like the actual like scary version. I say scary, the actual monstrous version in 25. I was like, oh wow, that's actually a reason to be wearing that whole mask thing. That's fun. I will say that mask quality was pretty crap.
Yeah.
Like I'll say that much at least, that it was like, oh, that's kind of a dumb mask. Honestly, like the 2004 one, it's ironic. The 25 one, it's more iconic. His actual face is more iconic, but then the masked face is more iconic for the 2004 one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I never really got why. I think like the whole thing about like just the fact that, you know, a young Gerard Butler is, you know, a very handsome man. Like, yeah, I guess you got to have that as untempered, like detracted as possible for a wider audience. And plus, it kind of adds to the whole more tragic figure than just a straight up monster. Despite the fact that Gerard Butler's Phantom does a lot more destruction.
I would say he's more evil.
I would say he's more evil.
I don't sympathize with him at the end. I sympathize with the 25 one.
I really don't know. But at the same time, I should have said, like, the most that his face is in this movie, like, if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, I guess, is like, it's just kind of like weirdly malformed, I guess, or it's kind of like, I don't know whether it's like meant to be a burn, like a young burn scar or something, but it really just takes up the upper right quarter of his face, and it's honestly not that bad.
That's it. He's like a 12th of the Elephant Man, and that's it.
Yeah, which, to be fair, in late 1800s, early 1900s France, that would have been enough.
Right.
But
fair.
France is just like that. But the fact that he is also able to, in the end, escape and have an entire life on his own, something like another 30 to 40 years into the future, shows that, like, it wasn't that bad off. Like, he probably was, like, they talked about his character being a genius, like this architect and engineer, and this whole, like, I'm realizing now he's a Mary Sue villain. He's like Thanos. Fucking shots fired. I get it. Fucking, that's a stupid villain. You people need to understand that. But they were talking about, like, he's this genius type character. I kind of realized, it's like, oh yeah, no, he probably was just able to find a firm or something to hire him that were just like, yeah, we understand, like, we're not gonna, like, you have to wear this mask or anything. Like, World War I was not far off. People eventually had to start wearing that because of, like, battle wounds and everything. Like those, like, famous, like metal masks that people would wear.
Yeah.
And so now, like, yeah, he just went off, had his own life, and was probably doing fine. It's just like he had just happened to be taken to an opera house and kept in a cellar, where, I should also say, I didn't go into it in detail, but he apparently grew up in a freak show and a circus, and that's where, like, Madame Giry, I think the maiden or mistress of the dormitories there at the opera house, found him as a child and brought him back and allowed him to be raised in secret in the opera house, rather than, like, hey, maybe get this kid a little help. I
mean,
I really do not get Madame Giry's motivations. She was so weird, and, like, was totally fine with the Phantom grooming and straight up kidnapping fucking I've completely blanked on her name. Christine.
Oh.
She's so weird. And that she was so okay with doing all of this.
We jested earlier off mic because of a flub I had regarding this A Hunchback of Notre Dame instead of this, but thinking about it more, they really are similar. The only difference is being, one's up high, one's down low.
Yeah.
One's kind of kind, the other is like he's evil and mean.
Yeah, one has angelic comparisons, the other has demonic comparisons.
Yeah.
I'm
what's the hero?
I'm really starting to think that, I think they may have just straight up just taken notes from Hunchback for this plot.
Now that I think was it Lon Chaney that was the Hunchback in the original black and white Hunchback in Notre Dame, or was it Lon Chaney Jr.? I think it was Lon Chaney.
I wouldn't know. I guess maybe. Wow.
Well, I'm going to look that up.
Small world. But, I just did not understand Madame Giry as a character. I really think they overcomplicated that whole bit. I think they could have had the whole thing of child, scorned child found his way into the opera house, but I don't think having Madame Giry be the catalyst of that was any benefit. It really was just basically being oh, hey, I'm going to continue to assist this active murderer and saboteur around the people that I am ostensibly ostensibly in the position to protect. That, because, I don't know, I think he's cute or whatever, or I think he's smart or all this other shit. I don't get it.
I took pity on him because
he got beaten by a his whatever, Romanai masters.
That he then killed.
Yeah. I do not, she is they really just don't, they gloss over that. She is actively, assisting murder.
You are aiding and abetting a criminal, ma'am.
Yeah, it's kind of dumb. And I think that might be my biggest complaint of that one, among, a lot of the other cheeser scenes that I just couldn't get into. It's just, why? Why overcomplicate this whole thing and then make this character basically completely irredeemable? Not the Phantom. The Phantom's I at least recognize is meant to be at least kind of complex, but Madame Giry, I'm just no, fuck her.
Okay, so briefly on this, it was Lon Chaney in the original silent adaptation of Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Cool.
Makeup's pretty good. I had forgotten which one it was, but I guess that makes sense because it was a silent movie. Lon Chaney Jr. wasn't really doing silent stuff. Mm-hmm. Besides that, on that point, I had kind of, until we started talking about it here, I'd forgotten about her kind of as a character in general, because it doesn't really go anywhere other than the revelation moment, oh, I've got to protect her and save her, whatever.
Yeah, you're a little late there.
And even then, I feel like he would have done that anyways. But it's something that we've mentioned on this show time and time again, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't recall an instance where there was too much backstory given in the original. It always seems to be the remake that's trying to almost justify its existence by giving more information on the background of characters, just because I just mentioned it in full circle, so it's fresh on my mind. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory comes to mind. It's sort of being this is why Wonka's the way he is, because Christopher Lee didn't let him eat Snickers. And it always feels forced. I never feel oh, so that's why Cruella de Vil is mean. I don't care.
Yeah.
I really do not care. So it just pads out. It pads out a movie with unnecessary information, and if you don't do it exactly right, it leads to just confusing characters that shouldn't exist. Like the Madam.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to kind of stem from a lot of the accessibility to older films now. Where at the time, you went to go see a movie, you saw it the one time, and if you wanted to see it again, you'd have to go see it at another another showing, and at best in the future you could get a cassette or a VHS of it. But
you'd be lucky if ABC played it as movie of the week.
Right, exactly.
50s.
And so you didn't really have to worry about that so much. But now that we have this wider access with the internet and everything, there's this pretty deeper desire. There's this wide desire of wanting to know why characters are the way they are, because we can have the ability to obsess over them now. And I think, and obviously this, like with this, the 2004, being based off of the play from the 90s, that it's not as much prevalent there, and you can kind of see it. It's like, okay, they still gloss over a lot of details, but it's not nearly as bad as a lot of origin stories nowadays. And as a result, I think people just really obsess over origin stories. And to the point where it's like, it really, like you said, it just overcomplicates a pre-existing character. And so it doesn't feel like it's actually integrating into the pre-existing story. It's purely for kind of its own sake. And just to be like, oh, this is how I have figured out the character. It's like, we don't really need that so much. Like, there was already kind of a backstory for the Phantom as well. He's a criminal lunatic who was like on a penal colony island. Like, I'd like to see how that shit shaped out. Like, that sounds insane. Just adding this whole thing of like him being this kid who grew up in the basements of this, or the catacombs of the opera house. It's like, it kind of just opens up way more questions than it has any need to. And just ends up throwing more people under the bus, with Madame Giry. And so I just can't support that sort of attitude with it and everything.
Yeah. And maybe if the origin story took a different direction, like something like that, where it would be harder to pull off, I guess, because they would have to find diary entries he wrote or something, because if he was literally just a lunatic hiding out, it would be even harder to understand her character than it already is for why she's doing what she's doing.
I mean, at that point, maybe don't even have Madame Giry.
I wouldn't, like I said, find diary entries or something, so that the characters can know what's going on. If you feel like you have to do this,
I think a lot of other horror movies. Well, a lot of modern horror movies are kind of hit and miss. I think one trend that I do like is a lot of them do end up having the route of they just have a very vague reference to a criminal past. Damn it, I think I mentioned on the last episode as well, or maybe not. That may have been at work. But the Stephen King story of the writer who gets trapped with the obsessive fan. I can't remember the name.
Misery?
Misery, thank you. Where you kind of learned about it you think, okay, maybe she's just obsessive or all this sort of stuff, but then you learn through the diary, the clippings that she saved is oh, she is literally insane. That's a great reveal. It's very minor, and it doesn't go into a deeper depth of it. It just gives you this taste of what kind of madness this person has been doing. If they had done something like that, then it would have been gone from, oh, this is a character of a strange origin, perhaps they're good, perhaps they have good intentions, but then that shoe drops, it's oh, this is actually a psychopath. And so now there's a reason to be truly scared. It's that would have been great. That would have been great for the sake of this being a horror film. Or at least based on a horror concept. Yeah.
And to that end as well, I guess it's also a little easier. Well, no, because the new Phantom has a large abundance of dialogue, most of it sung.
Yeah.
But not only the diary entries, but we get that really great Kathy Bates monologue where she just breaks down.
Yeah.
Talked about the cockadoodie car. Everyone remembers. But you can have fun with characters like that while still showing off their mental state. This has now been 20 minutes of us trying to write a character out of the 2004 movie.
Yeah, and also this is us trying to reconcile the two different versions of this character.
Right.
Which I guess ultimately is both to the point that we're getting at and also completely against the point we're getting at, in the sense of, well, we are comparing the remakes, but at the same time they are both doing two distinctly different things. We're trying to basically create a character that makes sense versus the character in both of these don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of silly for us to attempt it, but you know what? That's what we're here for.
And again, to a similar point I made earlier, as long as we're still on the 2004 train, is I think a lot of this, the origin story thing, also just stems from the fact that they wanted, I think, the character does shitty, awful things throughout the movie, and they wanted to make him more sympathetic because he is like one of the main characters. He's pretty attractive. They deliberately go out of their way to not mask much of his face, even when he doesn't have the mask on. And they give him like a high note ending where he's like, "Get out of here, forget everything you've seen here," you know.
Except for this little monkey doll that you will put on your wife's dead grave.
I'm sure she appreciated it, though. I'm sure she loved it. I'm sure she's smiling up at it, clapping away. But the original, he is, to an extent, misunderstood. He still does bad things, but without all the added origin stuff, I feel worse for him. And part of that might be the mob scene that's added in too.
Yeah.
Like, because he's killed by this mob that's chasing him because he's awful and he's a monster, but a lot of it is just that they're afraid of him and just the unknown of his being too.
Yeah.
And a lot of that can be demonstrated by that scene that I really love, which is where they sort of have him cornered and he just holds up his fist and they all start freaking out and backing away from him until he reveals that he doesn't actually have anything. They're literally just scared of the possibility of anything at that point, and I really like that.
Yeah, this is honestly, in any of the movies I've watched, this is honestly one of my favorite villain death scenes. I think this really, like, and even then, like, that truly kind of was that moment of, like, maybe he's not so much of a villain. Obviously he is, but, like, you know, having that moment of...
You
like,
kill, you're a villain, but yeah.
Basically, it's like, you know, the only thing they were afraid of was an empty threat, essentially. And I, like, when I first saw that, I thought it was fucking brilliant. So, like, I'll always laud that. Like, this one's ending is far and above my favorite between the two.
I would agree with that.
Because, like, it actually, like, ends on kind of a pretty distinct note. Obviously, in the other one, obviously, it's just kind of meant to be, like... I really don't think it was necessary to add the whole thing of, like, oh... he's old now, and he's, like, looking at the opera house when it's all ramshackle, and he's, like, auctioning off all these bits and pieces for it. Because, like, again, it just adds that weird scene of, like, why the fuck would he think to get the clapping monkey thing? Did he even notice it when he was in the layer? He was barely in that layer for, like, a few minutes. Like, I'm guessing Christine told him about it, like, when they lived together after that point, but still, like...
I would have been pissed. I would have been like, can we not talk about... He told us to forget. Can we just not?
Yeah, like, I'm genuinely...
Just go to sleep?
I am, at this day and age, what would soon one day be called traumatized, which I'm sure nowadays you just call women diagnosed with delirium, which is basically just being a woman disease.
Yes. Hysteria.
Hysteria, that's it, sorry. And so, like, I guess that, but then that's us just adding in more story again. It's just, like, on its own, it just makes no damn sense.
I mean, with the exception of... If we're being honest, it doesn't need this Titanic-style framework regardless.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason it exists at all is, one, Titanic, I think. Titanic spawned a number of those sort of frame-style, past-future setting type things, but also... the technological feat of the beginning where the opera sort of reassembles itself.
Yeah. That makes it
go
worth
to
it.
The past.
That honestly makes it worth it.
Yeah.
I think that scene's fantastic. I should also say that whole framing device is in medias res. Is that
what it's called?
It starts when the movie starts far, like, at a point further in the future of the events of the film or of a play. It's called in medias res. I don't know.
You're such a better film scholar than I.
That's more just I just know tropes at this point. It's like I learned some of the terms and everything. And I know a few, like, camera shot styles, but that's about it. I know Dutch angle is when the camera's tilted, but
the only reason I'm aware of the Dutch angle is because it's Batman 66 uses it every 5 seconds.
Yep.
But anywho,
yeah, our, you know, fleeting like knowledge of filming techniques aside, I want to like the 2004 one more. I really do. But again, I'm distinctly biased with my situation. It is hard for me to get past a lot of the cheesier elements for 2004 and a lot of just the moments like I think the acting was ultimately fine. I definitely think the guy playing Raoul was pretty weak though. Mm-hmm. I just I could and that actor I think is fine in a lot of stuff, but I think he's just a very bland character type. And Christine obviously I like just because her singing was fantastic. And Gerard Butler as the Phantom, I think, was a fantastic choice. I think a lot of people over the years have given him crap for that role for some reason. I think he did fine.
I thought it was good.
I think it's an unorthodox choice because I think ultimately he's a very gruff guy ultimately, but and having him play this what is meant to be a much more romantic sided character, probably just seems weird. But I thought it was fantastic. I think it worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Back to a point I made 30 minutes ago is that my favorite character in the original is the Phantom as portrayed by Lon Chaney, and everyone else kind of falls flat because they're just there to prop up the story of the Phantom, which is fine. That's sort of their construct, but they don't have much other purpose. So whenever he's not on screen, for me, the movie feels to drag. But I like a lot of the characters in the 2004 one, and the Phantom's not even close to being my favorite. I think that the two theater directors that end up possessing the opera are my favorite characters in the whole thing. They're so much fun.
What the old Muppet characters, the duo old guys,
Statler and
Waldorf. Yeah, that's basically they just made real life Statler and Waldorf to a degree. Slightly
they used
less
to work in scrap metal. Yeah,
I definitely like them as well, but again, that's another one of those points of it feels like it adds a bit too much at times. There's that moment where the theater starts burning down there at the end, and they just have one final last little throwaway scene of we're ruins, my friend, or all this sort of thing, and it's okay, whatever, moving on.
I can definitely see that.
But
at least their motivations were clear.
I do think they are.
What's her name?
I know there's a term for this archetype of character that meant to be kind of the types that are we are here to jovially recount things that happened off screen and to give kind of further context for the following scenes and that sort of thing. And I think that's a fine addition. I think that's a fine thing to have. It's a good and engaging way to keep you going with the story without having to have entire lengthy, boring scenes. So I think their position in the movie is ultimately necessary. I just still at times I'm just kind of I get it. I think they're the whole song where they were trying to kind of solidify the prima donna as oh please stay, have us here and be here. And
everything. Yeah, sure, Carlotta to stay and
that whole thing. It was that basically could have just been summed up in a maybe 2-minute scene of getting them to convince her to stay, and because ultimately she's just meant to be a foil, and just meant to be kind of another reason to have the Phantom show up and to kind of sabotage the production. That's kind of about it.
Right. I feel that specifically, they could have reworked it differently, but I think that specifically is a pitfall that many people have just regarding musicals in general.
Yeah.
Because especially when you start getting away from what are considered the main cast of characters, it's a lot easier to inflate something that could be settled in a shorter amount of time through a song and dance number.
Yes.
Which I get, but I'm such a big musical fan, I tend to overlook it.
Yeah. And I ultimately, I'm sure if I saw the stage production of this, I'd like it a lot better. I think ultimately it lends itself to that kind of long form of theater type. But having it in the film, it just always tends to kind of just rub me up the wrong way. And, and honestly, that ends up being kind of a point in 25's favor, because while I do agree that, the characters are pretty flat and they don't really do anything, they do everything they need to. They, a lot of times, older movies, they didn't really necessarily need characters to be super deep. At times, you just kind of need the movie to kind of progress forward. And so I try to kind of shift my mindset whenever I'm watching older movies of okay, this is a movie half the length of most modern feature-length films. It's not really meant to be doing anything super over the top. And so I just kind of go into it with that mindset. And I think, honestly, yeah, I think all the characters did fine. I think the Ledoux character and Raoul character were, doing. They had their whole moments there at the end when they were going through the catacombs and everything, and it was like, it's sufficiently dramatic enough. And so I really never had a major problem with it. I loved the Phantom, but I even at times I was just kind of like, all right, get on with it, buddy.
I guess maybe a lot of it, when I say characters, a lot of them are sort of background nothings, but you are right, they do at least make the plot move in the direction that it needs to. I guess when I say that, I guess the more general aspect is the main female lead. What is her name?
Christine Daae, but I don't remember the actress.
Yeah, that's what I don't remember the actress's name, but
Just
the woman who was woman who was playing Mary
Philbin.
Mary Philbin.
Yeah.
That felt flat to me too.
Yeah.
Which I guess is my main drawback, because of all the parts, that should feel on par with the likes of Raoul and the Phantom, and maybe that is just a more modern mindset. I'm not sure.
I think so. This does kind of go back into a lot of the silent film things of the female love interest, the female lead is kind of more just as as much a prop as anything. It's more meant to be kind of like the catalyst by which drama happens.
Right.
And so I think that's done itself no favors, obviously. And we've seen that with it, and I've seen that with a lot of silent films, all the Buster Keaton types and everything. It's ultimately the main lead is just this pretty bland white bread type character. It's rare that you have a female lead with agency, which I say that as if Christine in the modern one really has much agency either.
Right.
She kind of gets pulled around from place to place, so literally at times just literally in a trance. You still there? If you are speaking, I cannot hear you. Oh, there you are.
Hello. Okay, we must have cut out briefly.
Yeah. There's a brief moment.
Okay.
The last thing I had said was
Scary.
just kind of. The last thing I had said was I was talking about the Christine in the first one didn't have a lot of agency, but then I also said that the Christine in the modern one didn't really have a lot of agency either, including to the point of being in a trance in a lot of scenes.
Yes. Which that is fair. That's a fair point too, because both of them are sort of props in the end to sort of be this battle between the influence of the Phantom and then the love interest that is Raoul. I guess just in general, it feels like she has more to do in the new one, just generally speaking, which again, more modern mindset. I get it. But right. To the end that she's even sort of the resolution at the end, she's the reason that the Phantom lets them go.
Yeah.
Because she's the one that ultimately the pity she gives him, I guess, is sort of the wake up moment of okay, I can't do anything in this situation. This is too far gone. They love each other. I'm not winning here. So yeah, which I liked.
Yeah, I do ultimately like the character moments between all three of them better. I mean, obviously, I just think I still think they could have done a bit more with Christine.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a God. I am so back and forth on both these fucking movies.
Yeah,
I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure you're pretty solidified in yours. But honestly, with mine, I don't know whether at this point I've overanalyzed the original to the point of that it's just kind of more touted up in my head, or if I'm just kind of down on a lot of just cheesiness in general in 2004 ones, because ultimately I don't have a problem with cheesy. It's just you gotta fully commit. Just having moments where it's oh, we're gonna have this entire side scene so this guy can ride in on white horseback and everything. It's what the fuck was this? Why?
The drama of it all.
It's it doesn't. It's she's somehow I feel like they were gonna try to explain why is it that she keeps falling into a trance thinking that this is an actual angel and everything. You literally know who's talking to you. You recognize his voice. Why are you falling for this? I really just did not get it.
It's like a dime store Fabio Laden romance novel.
Well, right. which is no point in its favor. So, like, I truly do not know my ultimate opinion on it.
Though you say that, maybe this is just me peering too much into things, but I think that both of our opinions are fairly clear at this point. And I think that they both lie in opposite directions. If I were to assume based on the conversation that we've had, I think we both understand each other's points, but we haven't really changed our opinion going in as going out. Well, not entirely. I do recognize more flaws with the new one than I did going in, but I think I still enjoy it more.
Yeah.
As I did before.
And I think ultimately my bias is going to win out. And I got to say, I like the original. I like it a lot. I think I'd watch it again. I think it's a quick little thing. It's like, oh, this is interesting. That's not to say I wouldn't watch the 2004 one again. I think it's pretty great. But there's just it is always a clear sign for me that when I'm in it and it's a musical, if I am feeling the need to just like skip ahead 10 seconds, because it's just like, all right, I get it. And a lot of the scenes, which again, ultimately, it's being in movie format does a musical no favors, in my opinion, especially when it's very meant to be a stage show. There are movies that do better with it, obviously, like Little Shop of Horrors. I think that's still a fantastic movie on its own. But I just found myself more and more by the end of the other one, the 2004 one, like going, okay, yep, okay, let's go on. It's like, messed up face, done, like the whole like dramatic ending with the play, and like, oh, like why he left a rose there with the ring and everything. I don't know. It's like it ultimately kind of did no favors for itself for me by the end, so I gotta give it to the original.
A rose would have made more sense than a monkey.
Yeah.
not just romantically and grieving wise, but like thematically too. I don't know.
Or like maybe at the auction there they found like a memorabilia of her father. Like I'm pretty sure she had a photo of him, or at least a picture of him at some point. Like she definitely didn't get that out when they ran out. Like that would have been nice and kind. But no, the clapping monkey doll.
Like it's a... Yeah. Nope.
So weird.
Oh, but those were... those are our thoughts.
Yeah, the rare occasion where I enjoy the original.
Yes. And I'm opposed to that.
Yeah,
not opposed
exactly.
to that, but on the opposite. Yeah. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it does. I don't know. What can I say?
Yeah. Mixing it up a little. We've had a lot of ones where we were very much of the same mindset. It's good to have one where it's a bit different.
We've had some laughs. We've had some gaffes.
Yes.
Oh, but I think it's time to say farewell, perhaps.
Ooh, look at Mr. Musical Man over here.
Maybe I shall launch into the socials.
Yes. I was partially convinced there that you were, the way you were kind of leading into it was like, do you have a musical number for the socials?
What if I did? What if I just launched into a Randy Rogel inspired musical number about our Twitter and Instagram?
I mean, like, I would be both shocked and amazed. Shock and awe, motherfucker. Jesus.
Oh, well, too bad I don't plan that far in advance.
That's fine. I think ultimately we are good.
But, so that being said, you can go ahead and follow us, like, subscribe, leave reviews, comment on any of the podcasting platforms on which we were hosted, which is quite a few. Like iTunes or Apple Podcasts is what it's called now, Google Play, Spreaker, Podbay, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Podomatic. All the good ones were on YouTube too, but we're hosted by Anchor. Thank you, Anchor. You can send us an email, theyremadeit@gmail.com, with any suggestions, possible future episodes you may want us to do, feedback, just want to talk, that's fine. And go ahead and follow us at It Remade on Twitter and They Remade It at Instagram for updates about the show, future episodes, possible future episodes, suggestions that we've made on the show, what was the other one? Full circle diagrams that I enjoy making. Yep.
Yes.
Eventually, I will run out of those because we're not covering enough shows. We're not covering enough movies that have a lot of overlap, but that's fine. I still got a decent sized backlog of people that I have not covered yet.
Yes. God knows we will never get around the bag of snakes that is Hollywood.
Nope. And as long as we throw the occasional Disney episode in there, the names will continue to grow.
Hooray!
As it always does.
God love the gray goo scenario that is the modern entertainment industry.
And but that is it. That is all I have for socials.
I guess we're coming up to the relative end here. I think we have 2 more standard episodes, and then we'll have the end of year chat.
Surprise everyone, because for the first time ever in the history of the show, we have 2 Christmas themed episodes coming up. We have never. We've been doing Halloween every year, but we have never done a Christmas themed episode to this point. And now we're doing 2.
Purely unintentionally, because I had originally, like I said, we said at the beginning, I had picked Dune to do originally because I was thinking, okay, that's going to be a big one to do at the end. That's been a hot ticket item lately and everything, and people are so super hyped for it. And you told me about the part 1, and I was like, God damn it! Like, come on,
we gotta wait 2 years.
I just and I truly do not think they mentioned anything about it being a part 1 leading up to this. I was so annoyed.
I had not seen anything. No.
Yeah, so I've picked something else. It happens to be very Christmas themed, and it's something I have honestly wanted to have an excuse to take a crack at for any reason, not even just for this show, for a very long time. And I won't spoil it. Obviously, I'm sure many of you. However, there are not many iconic Christmas movies that are as iconic as this one, so I'm sure it's not going to be hard to guess ultimately. Which I have zero problem with because it is fantastic, and I'm going to be very excited to see the original version of it. Among many, I think. There's been a few.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's been a number. We've pretty much just given it away at this point, but yeah.
You don't know.
You don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I think I'm excited for that, but I think it kind of wraps us for the morning, evening, I don't know, whenever you people are watching this. Time is an illusion. So as we sit here at the outside of the, I don't know, St. Louis Opera House or something as it's being auctioned off. I don't know.
Yeah, it's auctioned up. Oh, yeah, like in the movie. I was like, what's happening?
I don't know, like Chicago one. I don't know. Whatever vague Midwestern city you want that has something being auctioned off.
I actually did just participate in a local auction the other day.
Really?
Yeah.
How's that?
I got a small CRT TV out of it.
Ooh. There's no clapping monkey. And so, as always, I am just a House of Cards Stuart.
And I'm watching House of Cards right now, Jacob.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh.
I have not been paying attention to the show at all. I've just been...
Just watching Kevin Spacey be weird.
Yeah. Be weird, that's an understatement.
Yeah. Topical.
Well.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Child of the wilderness, born into emptiness, learn to be lonely, learn to find your way in darkness. Who